Hello everyone and welcome to yet another Jujutsu Kaisen character discussion. Today I'm going to be talking about Suguru Geto, one of the main protagonists of the Hidden Inventory arc, the main antagonist of Volume 0, and seemingly the main antagonist of Jujutsu Kaisen up until the reveal of the true villain during the Shibuya incident. Geto is a very interesting character because he's not necessarily evil. It's more so that his way about doing things is evil. Geto is very much an embodiment of that very famous phrase, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain, which I interpret as generally meaning that the world that the hero is fighting to protect is really messed up, and if you spend enough time living and working in it, you're going to see that things really do not work. And you're going to end up becoming the villain of your own story because, hey, you're going to have to do some pretty messy shit if you really want to fix things. So, I think I should probably talk about Geto in chronological order, because the order in which he experiences things is very important to understanding why he becomes the way he is. When we meet Geto in the Hidden Inventory arc, it's kind of a shock, because he's pretty much a complete 180 of the person that we've seen in Volume 0, and some of the person that we think we've been getting to know throughout the series up until this point. Geto is someone who is very concerned about protecting the weak, and the mission of Jujutsu sorcerers to exercise cursed spirits for the purpose of protecting non-Jujutsu sorcerers. So, basically the complete opposite of the person that he becomes closer towards the present. He even fights Gojo over this stuff. Hidden Inventory is very important. I mentioned this in my video about Gojo, in that it essentially establishes what sequence of events led to Gojo and Geto going separate ways and becoming the people they are in the present. And the Hidden Inventory arc essentially fills Geto with doubt, and then eventually leads to his fall. What is it, as they say, the more righteous they are, the farther they fall? So, in the Hidden Inventory arc, Geto and Gojo are entrusted with escorting Riko Amanai, I think her last name's Amanai, whatever, the Star Plasma Vessel to Master Tengen, so that Master Tengen can merge with her and not evolve and probably turn into some kind of eldritch monstrosity. But throughout this arc, Geto comes to very much care about Riko, as well as Gojo. They both become very concerned with her well-being, to the point where they would totally abandon the mission and fight the rest of the Jujutsu sorcerers and whatever Master Tengen becomes, if Riko decides that she doesn't want to merge with Tengen anymore. Which is like, Jesus Christ. I guess you could say that this is the point in which Geto becomes less concerned with like the overall mission, but is more so concerned with like the individuals. It's kind of like how when you see like there's this big natural disaster, or like this atrocity happens during a war, and like 1,000 people die. Well, 1,000 people is like a number. The bigger the number, the much more difficulty people have sort of comprehending and relating to. But when it's one person whose name and story that you get to know, suddenly it becomes very tragic, and it's much more easy to sympathize with them. That's sort of what happens here with Riko. And when Riko is killed by Toji, and Geto is beaten by Toji, he sees that a lot of the problems that Jujutsu sorcerers have to deal with are caused by normal humans, or, as Toji refers to it, monkeys. I'm going to try and avoid using the term monkey too much, because without context I'm sure I'll probably get flagged for hate speech or something. But yes, Geto realizes that, man, these people that we are supposed to be protecting, gee willikers, they sure are making my life fucking difficult. And I'm sure the year after Hidden Inventory, where every time Geto absorbs a cursed spirit, he experiences the sensation of swallowing a vomit rag, did not do very much to help his mental state. could you imagine basically like having to swallow a vomit rag every day, or multiple vomit rags? I can't imagine that would be a very pleasant experience. I can't even imagine like getting used to that. That would probably be the worst part. But Geto becomes very disillusioned with his mission as a Jujutsu sorcerer and sort of his sense of morality. And this is where Yuki comes in. Yuki is, at this time, the third special grade Jujutsu sorcerer, or I guess first, because she's older than Gojo and Geto. And Yuki's goal, moral standing is very ambiguous, because she walks up to this very conflicted special grade sorcerer teenager and is like, "Hey kid, what type of girl do you like? Man, being a Jujutsu sorcerer sure is tough. I would really like to get to the root of the problem and just get rid of cursed spirits entirely. You know, there are a few ways to do that, you know, like killing all non-Jujutsu sorcerers. Oh well, nice meeting you, bye!" And then just leaves for the rest of the story. Until we learn more about Yuki, it's really hard to say what exactly her deal is, if she's a good person or not. Who knows, maybe Yuki's the real main villain. But this basically plants the seed within Geto. You know, the soil has already been fertilized by the very disillusioning experiences of hidden inventory in the time after that, and Geto's like, man, if we did kill all the non-Jujutsu sorcerers, we would basically have, like, no issues anymore. Because humans have cursed energy, but unless they're a sorcerer, they can't control it, and that rampant cursed energy is what creates the cursed spirits. Which is where all of the work for Jujutsu sorcerers comes from. So, Geto eventually goes to some town out in the countryside, and he rescues these two young girls. I believe their names are Mimiko and Nanako. I don't quite remember. They're not super significant in the story, but these two very young sorcerers have been captured and tortured by their town full of, what would you call them, superstitious hicks. So Geto fucking kills, like, all 100 people in the village, which is, like, a war crime? Well, I mean, they're not at war, but, like, he basically just massacred an entire village of people. Because upon seeing how non-Jujutsu sorcerers directly are affecting Jujutsu sorcerers, he's like, alright, fuck this. There's really no point in working to protect these people anymore. Like, what do we get out of it? Like, what do we get out of protecting non-Jujutsu sorcerers? Most of them don't even know we exist. Their very existence creates the things that kill us on a regular basis. And some of the time, their own fucking superstition or malice leads to them directly harming and killing us. So let's just fucking kill all of them, so that we don't have to deal with their problems anymore. So Geto decides to go on a crusade to wipe out all of the non-Jujutsu sorcerers for the purpose of allowing Jujutsu sorcerers to live normal lives. This leads to some conflict with Gojo, which initially doesn't go anywhere because Gojo can't really bring himself to kill his friend. So Geto goes off into the world, takes over the, I think he takes over the Star Plasma Association, because they're already basically a cult of non-Jujutsu sorcerers who worship Jujutsu sorcerers, so taking that over is pretty easy for him, though he of course sees them more as like objects that can be used as pawns. And throughout the next 9 years, Geto assembles, I guess, like a family of Jujutsu sorcerers who believe in his cause for one reason or another, and they go about on their mission to wipe out the non-Jujutsu sorcerers. Now, Geto's mission is very interesting, because eliminating all of the non-Jujutsu sorcerers would lead to the extinction of cursed spirits. Geto's curse technique is curse manipulation. He is able to absorb and control cursed spirits. If all of the cursed spirits are gone, Geto no longer has anything to fuel his power. If you think about it, Geto is completely fine with rendering himself powerless if it means that all of the other Jujutsu sorcerers are able to live happy, peaceful lives. If you think on it on an even higher level, the elimination of cursed spirits would pretty much eliminate the need for Jujutsu sorcerers. So even though these people have curse techniques, they wouldn't really have any need to use them. So in a way, his mission is to eliminate non-Jujutsu sorcerers so that the Jujutsu sorcerers can live like non-Jujutsu sorcerers. It's very interesting stuff. I guess it's sort of like how Jogo wants to replace humans with cursed spirits because they're the true humans. Sort of like that. Now, the problem with Geto's plan and his ideology is that he seems to be under the belief that the ends justify the means. Now, Geto's plan of genociding all of the non-Jujutsu sorcerers is really terrible already. Like, that's really bad. You're planning on committing a genocide of billions of people. But you have to consider how his ends justify the means worldview is also harmful to Jujutsu sorcerers themselves, as we see in Volume 0, where Geto is totally willing to attack the Jujutsu schools and kill fellow Jujutsu sorcerers in the name of his goal. So you have to wonder, Geto, would you be willing to kill all of the other Jujutsu sorcerers if it meant creating a world where Jujutsu sorcerers can live in peace? Like, is there a point where Geto wouldn't be willing to kill someone for the sake of his goal? You really have to wonder, at what point does achieving his goal of a world without non-Jujutsu sorcerers, at what point is that no longer more important than ensuring a future for Jujutsu sorcerers, basically? At what point do the means become less important than the ends and you're not willing to do something anymore? Because we don't really see where that point is for Geto. He attacks the Tokyo school, he almost kills Maki, Inumaki, and Panda. He already doesn't value Maki's life because she has that heavenly restriction without a technique, which just goes to show that Geto is sort of still carrying over the shitty worldviews of the established Jujutsu society. Well, I mean, he wants to get rid of all non-Jujutsu sorcerers, so in a way, I mean, he's worse than the Jujutsu establishment in their opinion towards people without curse techniques. But he's willing to kill these up-and-coming, very promising Jujutsu sorcerers, including Yuta Okotsu, who is a fellow special grade sorcerer, in the name of getting Rika Orimoto, if I recall her last name correctly. He's willing to kill all of these young, promising Jujutsu sorcerers for the sake of achieving his mission. We don't see really what goes on at the Kyoto school. I think some of the staff gets killed, so he's killing other Jujutsu sorcerers there. You could argue that as long as his curse user family is okay, he doesn't have an issue with it. But what happens when one of them decides to disagree with him on something and they get in the way of his goals? It's a very flawed worldview. It's the overall problem with the ends justifying the means, because sometimes the ends you're using can fuck over the means that you're trying to achieve. Now, Geto is of course defeated by Okotsu, and is eventually killed by his best friend Gojo. But at the end, Geto says that he never had any ill will towards anyone from the schools, and that he just couldn't bear to live in this world where it's pretty much impossible for Jujutsu sorcerers to really live happy lives and be at peace. Now, I just went on a rant for 10 minutes about why his whole means sort of get in the way of that, but still, you could argue that when it comes to his goals and motivations, Geto was never a bad person. But the things that he did made him a bad person, which is probably more important. I mean, most villains don't think they're the villain of the story, they think they're the hero of the story. So, Geto is most certainly in the wrong because of how he was going about trying to make a better world for Jujutsu sorcerers. Yuki, of course, mentions trying to think of some other ways to try and get rid of curses, but Geto doesn't wait long enough to find that out. He just goes for what I guess would be the easy way out. And that leads to all of the bad stuff that happens with him, and eventually his death. Now, in many ways, Geto is somewhat a reflection of Gojo, in that, like how Gojo wants to raise the next generation of Jujutsu sorcerers to be better than the last, and replace the conservative establishment of the Jujutsu world so that they can be better as sorcerers, Geto also has his own disciples who believe in his goals in some form or another. And even after he's been killed, his disciples are still dedicated to achieving this goal of a world where there are only Jujutsu sorcerers, and they're able to live in peace without the threat of cursed spirits. And they even go so far as to make a deal with Imposter Geto to try and get his body back. They go so far as to trying to revive Sukuna so that they can get his body back. So, much like Gojo, you could say that Geto has already succeeded in his goals of creating successors to his beliefs, so that when he's not around anymore, there will still be people that are trying to create his ideal world for Jujutsu sorcerers. But with that, that's really all I have to say for this video. Geto is an example of what I consider to be the best type of villains, in which they are villains who are a product of a way the world works in their setting. Because it's much easier to sympathize and understand their motivations when they're not just like some mustache-twirling evil guy, or they just have some sort of tragic backstory, but when they are a product of everything that is wrong with the world that they are in. And oftentimes, the protagonists are fighting to uphold that world that created the villain. So you really do have an interesting sort of narrative, thematic, internal conflict going on. And I think Geto fills that role very well in the time that he is present in the story. And who knows? It has been hinted that Geto's soul is still in his body, despite it being taken over by that brain thing that may or may not be Noritoshi Kamo. I don't know, it hasn't been revealed at the time of recording this video. But we'll see if Geto comes back in any way, shape, or form. I don't think he will, but we'll just have to see. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Jujutsu Kaisen chapter reviews every week, and I do Jujutsu Kaisen character discussions every other week. I had initially planned on doing a discussion on Toto, but with the things currently going on in the Shibuya incident, I am going to wait, because I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of Toto content in the near future. So I think it would be better to wait until after all of that is revealed to have a nice, thorough discussion about him. So for the next discussion, I think I'm going to be talking about Sukuna, so I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun. So you have that to look forward to. If you enjoy other series such as Record of Ragnarok, Chainsaw Man, and Kengan Omega, I do videos on those series as well, so if you're interested in those, you should definitely check out my channel. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to it on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.